Okay, now I'm going to talk a bit about birds and how they perceive electromagnetic fields. That's what I studied. Okay, so this is not covered in your textbook, but it's still certainly important to know. Okay. All right. So there's two main proposed mechanisms for how birds perceive electromagnetic fields. But I do want to say that these two main proposed mechanisms are pretty heavily debated. And birds are a diverse class of animals, right? This is a very extreme example. But when you're talking about any group of animals, there's a lot of variety, right? Birds are no different. Hummingbird is certainly different, has a different ecological niche, a different life history than an ostrich does, right? An extreme example, just to drive the point home, that there are lots of species differences when we talk about this stuff. Okay. Two main proposed mechanisms for birds. How are they sensing magnetic fields? One is saying, there's a math sense actually, that uses both magnetic intensity and inclination information. So when you can sense both that information, right, it can give you like a grid of the Earth and where you are. And this is proposed to be light independent, so you don't need light. That's important, because for the next one, you do need light. Okay, so for the first mechanism, it's said to be found in the trigeminal nerve in the beak. Pretty good evidence to show that is true. So there's something going on in the nerve that beaks birds to detect intensity and inclination information of the Earth's magnetic field. There's also a proposed mechanism in the eye of birds, so actually seeing the magnetic field. That's why it's light dependent. Light dependent, the eye perceive. And the people who talk about this mechanism say that it's an inclination compass. So these are two mechanisms of how this happens in birds. Okay. I'm going to talk a bit more about this one because there's an interesting brain region associated with this mechanism that I studied. Okay. Alright, so we're going to talk about the eyes. How do birds perceive Earth's magnetic field with their eyes? Well, we can think about color vision in humans as kind of parallel. Or low light vision. We can think of color vision or low light vision. Humans have photoreceptor proteins in the rods and cones in the retina. But there's a molecule, right, responsible for allowing the cells to detect these changes. So this chemical is called rhodopsin, and it allows us to see in low light conditions. And the same kind of thing is happening in birds for perceiving magnetic fields, or at least that's the theory. But they have these cryptochromes, so it's a similar kind of protein, and it's sensitive to electromagnetic fields. And that there are high concentrations of these cryptochromes in the retina of birds. So the people who do this work are saying, okay, this is how this is happening, starting with these kinds of molecules, cryptochromes. Alright, so birds, we know they're sensitive to magnetic fields, they're perceiving them with their beak, but we're talking about the eyes. So they're seeing magnetic fields, so what's happening in the brain? Well, turns out that there's this brain region called cluster N that was discovered in 2005 and implicated to be important in sensing Earth's magnetic field. Cluster N. So what you're seeing there is a brain section of a bird. Okay. Sagittal view from the side. And the red area, shaded area, is an area where a bunch of neurons light up in certain conditions. I'll talk about what those conditions are. There's not a lot of empirical papers about cluster N. I think there's 9 now. We can actually talk about everything we know about this brain region pretty easily, which is not usually the case, right? Okay. So when cluster N was discovered, it was labeled as a night vision region. So when you take birds that migrate at night, so a lot of songbirds migrate at night, lots of them. Even if they're active mostly in the day, throughout the year, they might still migrate at night. Lots of different reasons for that. Safety for predators is one thought. But if you take a nocturnal migrant and you look at their brain, you find cluster N activation at night, but not in the day. Okay? Additionally, if you cover birds' eyes with eye caps, block their vision, as shown here, with an eye patch. It's not super clear, but it's there. Okay? Okay? You see no activation in this brain region, but again, their eyes are not covered, you see it. So it has to be nighttime, but there still has to be some light. Okay. Which is when birds are migrating, right? When they're migrating at night, there's still some light around. They're not migrating in complete darkness. The moon, the stars give them light. Low light. Okay. When they kept doing work in this brain region, they decided to compare a bird that migrates, this European province, to a bird that doesn't migrate. Zebrafish. And what they found when they compared these two types of birds is that non-migrants have no activation in this region, and the migrants do. So they're saying that's evidence that it's important for magnetoreception. Okay, we'll get back to this. Why I'm skeptical. And the most convincing information that we have to say cluster N is magnetoreceptive is that when you lesion cluster N, animals can no longer correctly orient. Okay, let's break down all these figures. A lot of these studies in migration and orientation are done in something called an emblem funnel. So that's what you're seeing here. And you have to understand when birds want to be migrating, or it's migration season, I should say, they really want to migrate. They gotta go. There's a motivation to do that. If you put them in a little funnel, like this, and traditionally, there's 8 on the bottom, so you get the feet covered in 8. It's migration season, it's time to migrate. All of their footsteps will be going in one particular direction, because they're orienting in the direction they have to go. So you basically take out this piece of paper, and then you have all the little footsteps going in one direction. Now we use cameras, right? We don't really use ink and paper. You get more detailed information with the camera, but that's a pretty important method in this kind of works. And then what you end up getting as a reload are little figures that look like this. So you're getting the top view, okay? And each little dot is an individual's average kind of direction that they're going in. You also got these arrows. A longer arrow means the relationship is stronger. Shorter arrow means it's not a strong relationship. Right? Okay. And what comes? When we look at these two panels, sham lesion, lesion. So again, the lesion is damage to a brain area, right? You can see that this is a normal magnetic field. Don't worry too much about the distinction between these two. It's fine. Just two different ways of looking at it. But what you can see is that the birds without lesion, so a big lesion, sham lesion, they orient it correctly. They're all generally going in the right direction. But when the lesion cluster ends, they don't know what direction to go. And in this case, this kind of disorientation that's happening in these lesion birds, it disappears when you give them access to the night sky. So they start to look like this again. So in this case here, all they have access to orient properly, is Earth's magnetic field. Every other cue is blocked out. When you start to give them other cues, they can start to orient correctly again. So this is evidence showing that this brain region cluster end is important in magnetoperception. Alright, this is kind of a summary of what this brain region is. Active at night, nocturnal migrants, active orientation. They're captive, right? That's important. It's not in the wild, or we're looking at these birds. They have to be wanting to migrate, migratory condition. It has to be nighttime. And this is what cluster end actually looks like. So all these white dots, those are active cells. Okay. Still a lot we do not know about this brain area. One of my big criticisms of this work is that when you're comparing, go back to this finding, you're comparing non-migrants to migrants. And they're saying, oh, well, migrants have it because they need to be using the magnetic field to migrate. The non-migrants, they don't have it because they don't have to do such a thing. You're looking at the brains of these European robins, Well, these birds have strong drive to migrate. They also have strong drive to orient in the correct direction to migrate, right? So it makes sense. The cluster M is turning on. Non-migrants, in this research, they don't have that same strong drive, right? Sitting in the black box thinking, why am I in this black box? I don't know if that's true, of course. I'm anthropomorphizing. But there's a difference here. So I'm still curious about this. If you're asking, okay, well, why would a non-migrant use a sense of magnetic field? I hope that you've seen from our lecture today that there are lots of reasons why a non-migrant might use a magnetic field. Because it's just another cue to use for orientation and navigation. And every animal needs to do that. We also know that pigeons who are not migratory use magnetic fields to home, and chickens can sense magnetic fields. And zebra finches still need to navigate between feeding and breeding grounds, right? They still need to move around. Of course they do. So to say that magnetic field information is useless to non-migrants is a little naive, right? Okay. Now, if you're really paying attention, like, really thinking about this, you might think, okay, well, Maddie, what if they're just using this other mechanism, right? Maybe they don't have this one. Maybe they're just using this one. But aha, we have evidence for a light-dependent retinal magnetic sense in zebra finches. So, maybe they do have a cluster M. What is that evidence? Well, we know that zebra finches become disoriented under certain wavelengths of light that would disrupt those cryptochromes we were talking about. So here again, you're kind of looking at that top view set kind of element-formal orientation. Okay? In green light, which wouldn't disrupt the cryptochromes, they orient just fine. In red light, they get disrupted. And this same disorientation occurs in those nocturnal migrants that have cluster M activation. Okay. So the question's still kind of out. I tried to do an experiment with this. It didn't go so well. So I don't know is the answer to that question, as scientists often say. They're not sure yet. But I think still interesting things to think about. Is cluster M specific only to nocturnally migrating songbirds? Could it also be used in a bird using that compass information in a non-migratory context? And I'm saying there's more questions than answers. And I think that this claim that it's only present in nocturnally migrating songbirds, so it's stated and not conclusive. For those reasons I just talked about. Okay. That's enough about cluster M. And that also concludes our lecture for the day. But if you take anything away from today, I hope that you can remember that beetles use the Milky Way for orient. Alright. Thanks guys. See you next week.